Now we talk about metrical geometry presupposes projective or descriptive geometry. Well, the topic will be that of metrical geometry, and as we talk about metrical geometry, our first content is that of metrical geometry presupposes projective or descriptive geometry. Next, we talk about errors in Euclid. Next, we talk about superposition is not a valid method. Next, we talk about errors in Euclid. In fact, we continue the discussion on the errors in Euclid. And next, we talk about the axioms of distance. Next, we talk about stretches. Next, we talk about order as resulting from distance alone. So we move ahead and talk about the geometries which derive the straight line from distance. Next, we have got in most spaces, magnitude of divisibility can be used instead of distance. Next, we move on to the meaning of magnitude of divisibility. Next, we talk about difficulty of making distance independent of stretch. And then we move on to the theoretical meaning of measurement. So we move on and we talk about definition of angle. And having had given you the definition on angle, we talk about axioms concerning angles. Then we move on to an angle is a stretch of rays, not a class of points. Next, we talk about areas and volume. Having had talked about areas and volumes, we move on to the right and left. So we'll discuss right and left, and then we'll have the next topic, which is relation of metrical to projective and descriptive geometry. Well, we have the topic of non-quantitative geometry, which has no metrical presuppositions. Next, we'll talk about historical development of non-quantitative geometry. And then we'll move on to non-quantitative theory of distance. Next, we'll move on to inner descriptive geometry. Next, we'll have and inner projective geometry. Next, we'll have geometrical theory of imaginary points pair. And then we'll move on to new projective theory of distance. Our next topic will be that of the definitions of various spaces. So we'll talk about all kinds of spaces which are definable in purely logical way and talk about the logical terms. And then we'll have the definition of projective space of 3 dimensions. Next, we'll talk about the definition of Euclidean spaces of 3 dimensions. We move ahead and talk about the definition of Clifford spaces of 2 dimensions. This is how we come up to the next topic as we move ahead.